When building Facebook apps, we will no doubt find at some point that we need to store Facebook user data. In this chapter, we'll look at the best ways in which to do that. Now, why would we want to store user data? Well, for one reason, we may be able to offer the user a better user experience. When they enter our app, we will know who they are. Okay, we will know this from Facebook data, but we may be able to present application-specific information which we have stored linked to their particular profile. One example of this is leaderboards. We may show a list showing game players' scores and their positions with respect to each other. What can we store? Well, Facebook do have policies which define what should and shouldn't be stored, but basically at the end of the day, I would say use your common sense, store the minimum amount of information you need, and in most cases is probably just the Facebook user ID of the logged in user. The only reason to store other data, such as, for example, email address, is if you're going to be using that in an offline capacity, or if you need that for at some point in time later on to actually contact that user. You may also, of course, store check-in information to be able to plot a user's movements within your application, should that be part of your application's functionality. Let's take a look at that leaderboard example, and of course we need a person's name to show next to their score in the leaderboard. The simplest way here to store data is to store their Facebook user ID and their score. The Facebook user ID in itself, combined with the score, is pretty much anonymous. If somebody actually gains access to the table where we're storing user IDs and scores, if they don't know what the data represents, they won't be able to make any sense of it whatsoever. When building the leaderboard, we can use the Graph API to retrieve the person's name for display. And if the user changes their name, our app will actually show that change immediately within the leaderboard because we'll pull the latest Facebook information from their profile. Another example might be a photo gallery, where we need to display somebody's name next to their photo submission. We may also show some text or a description, some voting information, other information which we'll also store within our application. We can tie all of this information together to the person's Facebook user ID. Same reason as before, if they change their name, it will be reflected. Also, it maintains Facebook privacy. We can save the photo URL, or alternatively, if the photo is stored on Facebook, we can save the ID of the photo object. We can then use the Graph API to retrieve the user's name and to retrieve the link URL for the image if we stored the photo ID, and display the latest up-to-date information. There are pros and cons to this approach. Obviously, a photo ID takes less space to store than a URL, but you do require one extra Graph API call to pull out the information. Another potential disadvantage is that the user may have deleted the photograph from their Facebook profile, so trying to retrieve the photo by ID will return an error. You should cater for this in your application should you choose this approach. So where should you store this data? My assumption for this course is that you're using PHP or JavaScript, and an ideal choice in this case would then be a MySQL database or any other database engine you may support on your server. You will then be able to use PHP to query the contents of the database, to retrieve the person using the user ID, to retrieve their records, to show data. You may also, of course, use Ajax from a JavaScript-based application to trigger a PHP retrieval of data from the database and present it via Ajax within the application.